Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I'm Kristin Harmel.
I'm Patti Callahan Henry.
And I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
And this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. Our 4th co-host, Kristy Woodson Harvey, is traveling tonight and cannot join us, but she sends her love, I know we miss her, and her happy holiday wishes to our whole Friends and Fiction community. We will miss her on the show tonight.
And if you are not with us already, we really hope you'll join our Facebook group, which is more than 300,000 members strong. We'd also like to invite you to follow us on Instagram and YouTube, and to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, which is full of awesome bonus content. So you can find out more about our community and everything we have to offer, which is a lot, at friendsandfiction.com.
So on this episode, we are so excited to welcome John Irving to discuss his new novel, Queen Esther, which was just released on November 4th. So without further ado, let's give you a little bit of background on John Irving.
John was born in Exeter, New Hampshire in 1942. His first novel, Setting Free the Bears, was published in 1968. When he was only 26 years old. He has written 16 novels over the course of his incredibly prolific career. The majority have been international bestsellers. Kind of feel like we don't even need to introduce him. Anyway, his books have been translated into nearly 40 languages.
In 1980, John won a National Book Award for his novel, The World According to Garp. And in 2000, he won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay for The Cider House Rules. A Prayer for Owen Meany is his best-selling novel in every language. A dual citizen of the United States and Canada, John lives in Toronto.
Yeah, Sean, can you bring John on? Hi, John. Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
We are very happy to have you here. So in your latest novel, Queen Esther, we revisit the setting of your wildly popular The Cider House Rules, with appearances by St. Cloud's Orphanage, Nurse Edna and Nurse Angela, and of course by the ether-addicted, warm-hearted Dr. Larch. But this book is set earlier in Dr. Larch's time at the orphanage, and it centers around a different orphan, a young Jewish girl named Esther, who comes to St. Cloud's on a snowy night in 1908, not yet 4 years old, after the murder of her mother. The novel then spans much of the 20th century, all the way up to 1981, as Esther goes home as a nanny to a kind family in New Hampshire called the Winslows, and ultimately agrees to bear a child for their daughter Honor. It is this child, a boy named Jimmy, around whom the book largely revolves, as he grows into who he is and ultimately becomes a novelist. So that's a little bit about what this book is about. John, can you tell us a bit more? And then our very favorite question here on Friends and Fiction, can you tell us what this book is really about at its core?
Well, I think readers who are familiar with my novels know that I am ending driven, that I am writing toward an ending that I have preconceived, that is predetermined. And for that reason, when I'm beginning a novel, when I finally decide to write a novel, to start writing it, it has already pre-existed as a cast of characters for many years longer than it will take me to write it when I start.
Oh,
In the case of Queen Esther, I knew that my title character would be 76 in Jerusalem in 1981 at the end of the novel.
oh, wow.
I always know these things. I knew who she was. In this case, for the first time, I knew almost as much about the beginning of this novel, which I never knew, as I did about the end, because I knew Esther's life story in reverse. If she is 76 in Jerusalem in 1981, she's a Viennese-born Jew, born in Vienna in 1905. I knew how old she would be when she is orphaned, not yet 4, old enough to know her name, to know she's Jewish, and to know the Esther she was named for. I knew all of that. Well, in this case, I also knew the orphanage, and I knew the old doctor who was there. And yes, he was going to be a lot younger than readers or moviegoers of the Cider House Rules would remember. But he's the same guy, and he's up to the same business. So this was a kind of comfort in knowing my beginning, which I'd never experienced before. I often begin first chapters and decide, oh, that shouldn't be the first chapter. That's more like a 4th chapter. And I look for another first chapter, not this time, because the connection to Dr. Larch, in other words, came from Esther first. I thought, well, if you want her to be an abandoned Jewish child, I know a place for her, and I know exactly what they do with her there. And I also know that a Viennese-born Jew whose mother is murdered by anti-Semites, talk about an unadoptable orphan.
Yeah.
And that's what she had to be. She had to be one of those orphans that nobody wants because she comes with a little too much baggage. She knows where she came from. She already knows who she is. People who adopt orphans take the infants, not the kids who are old enough to know where they came from.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, of course, one of the things that draw your legions of fans to Queen Esther is that it does touch upon the world of the Cider House Rules by bringing back St. Cloud's orphanage and, as you mentioned, Dr. Wilbur Larch and nurses Edna and Angela, and the years before the events of the Cider House Rules take place. I know that they don't play a huge part in this novel, but I think readers, most of them, are gonna feel welcome to see those nurses on the page again. What was it like for you to revise these characters, especially Dr. Larch, 40 years after Cider House Rules?
Well, you know, the truth is, if you've as a fiction writer, you remember your characters from long ago novels, possibly better than you remember your childhood friends or your wrestling teammates when you were in university. You spent so much time with those characters. You know them pretty well. There was another advantage to me in this novel that, and readers of the Cider House Rules or people who saw the film will remember this. Dr. Larch is not the main character of the Cider House Rules in the sense that he's not the one who's on the page most of the time. One of his unadoptable orphans is the principal point of view character who's on the page most of the time. But anyone who read the Cider House Rules knows that Dr. Larch is the most important character, even when he's not there.
Yeah.
He is the one that has made everything happen. And he will be the reason, even when he dies, of making the unadopted orphan go back to the orphanage to replace him. Well, there's a parallel to Queen Esther here. Esther is also not the main character of Queen Esther in terms of who's on the page most of the time. For pages at a time, Esther's missing. She's gone. She doesn't seem to be in the story anymore, but she is manipulating everything that happens.
I love
And
that.
everything that happens points to her birth child, Jimmy, who doesn't know her, wanting to see where he came from.
Hmm.
Of everybody wants to know where they came from,
Yeah.
Esther included. Esther, when she finally is old enough to leave the orphanage as a ward of state, she has a Jewish childhood that has been stolen from her.
Yeah.
She wants to make up for all that time she didn't get to be a Jew.
Yeah.
Of course, she'll want to go back to where she was born.
Yeah.
At the wrong time to go there.
Yeah.
Esther goes back to Vienna in the 1930s when most Viennese Jews had already left or were in the process of leaving, the ones who could still get out. Esther's going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Well, that's intentional too. But even in those Vienna chapters where we're with Jimmy Winslow, who is mostly out of it all the time, and who needs his roommates to tell him what's going on, needs his Jewish German tutor to help him with more than his German. Jimmy is the point of view character that the reader is stuck with, but the reader already knows that Esther is behind the scenes.
Yeah.
The
Her
provocateur.
presence. And this was also because I wanted my Esther to be the embodiment of the Esther she is named for. The Esther in the Hebrew Bible, the Esther in the Christian Old Testament. And that character, that Queen Esther herself, was a marvel of hiddenness. She's a Jewish queen of Persia, and nobody knows she's a Jew. It's pretty hard to keep it secret, but she does. But when she comes out as a Jew, watch out for Queen Esther.
That's amazing.
She's on a mission. Well, I wanted my character to reflect the Queen Esther she's named for.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, did you plan on that from the very beginning? Like you said, you knew the ending and you were stunned you knew your beginning. Did you know Queen Esther would be based on, inspired by? Okay, you knew that all along. Okay.
Well, there's one advantage. There's one advantage. It takes a lot longer to write a novel if you need to know how it ends before you begin.
Yeah.
Because that means there are all these years of building a cast of characters and knowing an ending. And only after you've got the ending can you go back to where it begins.
Okay.
Well, the not writing part takes a lot of time.
It does.
But once you start, it's kind of an advantage to know where you're going. And then you have to be careful of, well, if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know what happens at the end, how can you foreshadow anything? Well, in the case of Queen Esther, because it's a shorter novel for me, the intention, and it's the intention of every historical novel, if you pick a moment in time, Jerusalem, April 1981, and say, this is where it ends. Well, my choice of that period of time was also intentional. I had the feeling very strongly when I was in Jerusalem in April of 1981 that the seeds were already sown for what looked to me like an eternal conflict, an everlasting conflict, and that was what I wanted to foreshadow at the end of that chapter. That Jimmy Winslow, who knows so little, he only knows what people tell him and what people teach him. He knows very little by himself. Even Jimmy has the feeling, the presentiment that this does not bode well.
Mm.
End
Okay.
it there.
So you just mentioned an autobiographical little hint that you were there too. And I would love to talk about maybe some of the autobiographical things you might have slipped into this novel. At one point in the book, Jimmy has a conversation with his grandfather who, quote, assured him that it was okay for a novel to be loosely autobiographical, adding the more loosely, the better. And we can't help but notice that you gave Jimmy what we believe is your birthday, March 2nd. He's a young man who dreams of writing novels one day. He wrestles, which we all know is part of your fascinating background. I believe he has your mother's maiden name. He is publishing
Correct.
a book called The Doctor's Rules, which might sound like Cider House Rules. And he goes to Jerusalem, as you mentioned, in 1981. So I'm curious whether there are more pieces of you in Queen Esther's Jimmy than there have been in any of your previous characters. What do you think?
Well, the answer is yes, there are more pieces of me than you've mentioned, but you have to understand this. There is frequently a lot of autobiography in the beginnings of my novels.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
A familiar New England landscape.
Okay.
A kid who wonders where he comes from. A kid with some element in his family, in Jimmy's case, his actual birth mother is not the mother who raises him, the only mother he knows. That's familiar. What I say about Jimmy Winslow and me is that both in Vienna in the 1960s and in Jerusalem in 1981, it was my intention to make Jimmy even more unaware than I was.
Okay.
He's out of it. But here's the difference. Nothing ever happened to me as interesting as what happens to Jimmy.
There was
in other words, the reason I've never written an autobiography that's longer than this is because that's about how much was interesting in my life to me. I can't write a novel about it. But that also means that I can feel free to use my autobiography and then make it much worse than anything that happened to me, or much better.
Yeah.
Because neither worse nor better happened, so to speak, to me. Like Jimmy, I went to Jerusalem in 1981 at the invitation of my then Israeli publisher and what was called the Jerusalem International Book Fair, but also because my favorite and first European translators, the publishers who first translated my work into their languages, were European Jews with long-standing ties to Israel. They were my friends.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
That's amazing. And do you feel like he has more than any of your other, even though you've put it in in the front end of some of your books, do you feel like Jimmy is the most you of any character you've written?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
No, not the most or the least.
Okay.
Because there is nothing in Honor Winslow, the mother who raises Jimmy, nor in his birth mother, Esther. There is nothing of my mother in either of those mothers, nor is my mother represented by the two women who organize Jimmy's first experience with fatherhood.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So that all the mothers in there are a lot of mothers in my novels.
Yeah.
But these mothers aren't anything like the mothers I knew. So no, there's more that is different in this than is the same.
It's nice to find the Easter eggs, though.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead, Barry Kay.
I'm just wondering if there is a character in any of your novels that you feel is the closest to John Irving.
No, the truth is I don't think about that. I mean, it's not. I don't care about that. If I were a writer who had a traumatic childhood or a traumatic adolescence, if I were a writer who had something autobiographical in my life that utterly changed my life or made me, quote unquote, who I was, well, maybe then I would be driven to be more autobiographical than I am. But my own story, I've had such a fortunate, in my opinion, I had such a fortunate childhood. I had such an easy early education and upbringing that I'm embarrassed at how easy it was for me, having had many friends whose lives were significantly more difficult. Think of how often in my novels I have been an ally to fictional characters. I personally am not. I'm not a woman. I was never pregnant. But I came to feminism and to women's rights and abortion rights because of who my mother was. I didn't make it up. It was what I grew up with. It was her business. She was a sort of walking abortion rights advocate before I knew there were other abortion rights advocates. I didn't make it up. Think of how often I've been in my novels an ally to LGBTQ characters. Think of how many trans women there are in my novels who are heroes, every one of them, every one of them. Well, again, I didn't make this up. My younger brother and sister, boy-girl twins, were gay and lesbian. I knew before they were old enough to come of age what trouble was ahead for them. And I knew to be afraid for them, for how they would be treated growing up in a small New Hampshire town. I grew up in a small New Hampshire town. I never knew any Black people. I knew very few Jewish kids in this small New Hampshire town. But I went to an international boarding school with students from all over the country and from all over the world. And I was on a wrestling team, and you become very close to your wrestling teammates. Those were my first Black friends. My first Jewish friends were my teammates. And at that age, in your teens, you talk about your childhood. You talk about your life in a way that you're not so comfortable when you get older.
Right.
but teenagers talk to each other.
Yeah.
The friendships that you had with the friendships I had with my wrestling teammates, that's where my Black friends and Jewish friends came from. And I heard their stories of what it was like to be a Black kid growing up in St. Louis, of what it was like to be a Jewish kid growing up in Chicago. I heard their stories, and I felt, boy, have I had it easier compared to them. And I don't want to give too much away about the Jimmy's roommates in Vienna. They're much more exotic and different than my actual roommate. My actual roommate was Jewish, and he opened my eyes to the anti-Semitism in Vienna in the 1960s. He showed me things that otherwise would have gone right over my head. And he was a lifelong friend and a lifelong first reader. And when I was first in Israel in 1981, he wasn't with me, but he was very much on my mind. I knew he'd been there. I knew his story. When I was back in Israel in the summer of 2024 to check my historical details, to go over all the details in that last chapter with my Israeli friends and readers, my Jewish roommate from Vienna had died. And I knew that he would never get to read this book. And I had always imagined when I was beginning it that this would be a book he'd really love. So he was very much a part of the process. He was on my mind.
I think so much of what all of us write, who write fiction, I think all of us find sort of accidental autobiographical elements that we don't intend to put into our novels. Now, this is a book, and I'm so happy for the segue here. Yeah. This is a book that really tackles anti-Semitism head on. And it's being published at a time when, wow, anti-Semitism has spiked again in a really alarming way. Could you talk a bit about the message in this book, John, and why it was something you wanted or needed to write about?
Well, you have to remember this book long pre-existed the events of October 7th.
Right.
Don't get confused by current events. But here's something to I think hold in mind. It was always my intention, knowing what Esther's storyline was, okay, and knowing what my intentions were for who she would end up being, right? Because once again, think of the ending. I knew from the moment I wanted to write this book that I was making an empathetic character who was one of those original European-born Jews who became one of those Zionists who were part of the founding of the State of Israel.
Wow.
That is who I wanted Esther to be. That is where I wanted her to end up. I wanted her to be driven to find out more about her Jewish self because of how much of the Jewish childhood she should have had was taken from her. She didn't get to be a Jewish teenager as the only Jewish child in an orphanage who was one of the ones who was never adopted. For all those years she was left there, she didn't get to be Jewish. It was taken from her. So I wanted her to leave, and I wanted my readers to feel every bit of empathy for this character, who, of course, she wants to know where she came from. She's a Viennese Jew. She wants to go to Vienna. But that's not enough of where she came from.
Yeah.
If she's a Viennese-born Jew, with her experience, her life formed by anti-Semitism before she's a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Formed. Well, if she's in Vienna in the 1930s and sees what's happening then and there's another place she came from.
Even before then.
The land of Judah, the land of the Israelites. She would be one of those early Zionists who makes herself an active part of the foundation of the state of Israel.
Yeah.
So that by the time Jimmy finally gets to Jerusalem to meet his birth mother for the first time, we, the reader, we know what Esther has been hiding. We know what she has kept secret for so long. And one of the things Esther dedicates herself to is protecting the family who takes her in from her Jewish business.
Yeah.
She makes it perfectly clear to the Winslows, my Jewish business isn't your business. You've provided me with the education to go where I want to go and be the Jew I want to be, but that's my business.
Wow.
That's not your business. And guess what? She is also dedicated for keeping her birth son safe. And if anyone in this story knows how unsafe it is to be Jewish, that would be my Esther.
Esther. Yeah.
Her history makes her know firsthand it's not safe to be Jewish. So there was the contradiction I was purposely setting up from the beginning, that Esther would even go so far as to not allow her birth child to be Jewish. And that's the kicker that one is waiting for. I mean, as Jimmy's Jewish German tutor tells him in Vienna, Anneliese Eisler, Jimmy, of course you're Jewish. Your mother was Jewish. Your father's Jewish. You're Jewish. Esther says, no, not so fast.
Yeah.
No, you're not. And so I was always writing toward that moment.
Okay.
And we know, but you know, what you have to be careful of when you're writing historical fiction where, okay, it's history, you know how it ends, you know where and when it ends. But if you're writing toward an ending you've preconceived, you have to be a little careful sometimes not to because you can foreshadow everything that's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. You have to be careful not to go too far. Well, there's that moment when Esther is leaving the orphanage and she loves Dr. Larch and she knows she's never going to see him again because she has other business to do. And she says, when she's leaving, all she can say is, I would give my right arm for you. And Larch says, typical of Larch, keep your arm. Keep both of them. Well, we know at the end that she's going to lose something.
That is, yep.
Okay?
Yeah,
Okay?
absolutely.
I mean, you have to, you're always balancing those tricks. And that's it.
Yeah.
Well, you keep saying how Esther wants to know where she came from. She wants to know who she is, right? She has this great driving force, and we're driving to the end of your novel where she's back in Jerusalem. She knows who she is. I feel like this is very much a novel about finding one's place in the world. And Esther is certainly searching for belonging. Jimmy goes to Vienna, as you've mentioned. He ultimately goes to Jerusalem in search of his identity. And on a much broader level, you also talk about orphans finding where they belong, and European Jews finding their place in the world as World War II is looming. So talk to us about why that search for belonging is such a theme for you. And did you even know that it was a theme as you started to work on this novel, or did it rise up in her search, in Esther's search?
Well, I did want, after all, I did want, since Esther is Jimmy's birth mother, I wanted Jimmy himself to be wondering if the foreignness he feels inside him is what she feels or what she felt, or if that's her inside him. But again, I was always writing toward that moment at the end where in Jerusalem, there's the German journalist who can't help but recognize the physical similarity between Esther and Jimmy Winslow, and he just presumes correctly that he's looking at a mother and son.
Yeah.
But as soon as he asks Esther for her name so that he can get the Jimmy's mother's name right, he sees what shock both Esther and Jimmy are in, that a total stranger, a journalist of all people, and a German one, has correctly recognized the resemblance.
Yes.
Well, he's very polite. He knows he's made an error of some kind. And he said, "Oh, es tut mir leid, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have presumed." And that was always the moment when Esther was going to say, not to Jimmy, but to a stranger, but purposely in Jimmy's hearing, "This boy is Honor's child."
Oh, wow.
And that's the moment. This boy is Honor's child.
Yeah.
That was some of the first dialogue I wrote.
Oh, wow.
There at the end, there was that moment when Esther herself is going to let Jimmy know that, and it's consistent with when she says to him about his Jewishness, "Just be a Winslow, Jimmy."
Yeah.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
said, "Just be a Winslow."
Yeah.
You're not going there. But that is the moment when Jimmy realizes, yes, that's who he is. He's the child of the mother who raised him, not the one who gave birth to him, but he's got her inside him.
Yeah.
That sense
He's
of
got a brave Jewish girl somewhere inside him. And there's that moment when he does recognize, this is who I am.
Yeah.
This is why I've felt so foreign here. But there had to be, I always knew there had to be someone, not just Jimmy's Jewish German tutor in Vienna. There's got to be someone who sees that they're a mother and child. Someone, the way, you could, you do recognize resemblances.
Yeah.
But identity, sure, it's a novel about looking for an identity, but no one is so much invested in her identity as Esther. And it kind of follows that it's the first page of the novel in the first chapter, when Jimmy Winslow is first introduced. And it says he felt there was an intrinsic thoroughness inside him. Before you even know who he is, you know that's how he feels.
Yeah.
That sense of wanting to know, who am I? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. John, I also wanted to ask you, you are known for writing so viscerally about New England. So in such a colorful way about New England that really brings it alive on the page. And you certainly do here before Jimmy goes off to Vienna. But of course, you're a full-time resident of Toronto now. Has living away from the area you write about changed your relationship to the setting at all? Like, has the distance given you any new perspective?
Well, I'm used to living away from New England, especially the three cities in my life that I've lived in for an appreciable period of time: Vienna, New York, and here in Toronto has given me, I suppose, I'm more acutely aware of the differences between small towns and ski towns, which I lived in for much of my life, and big cities. It's for someone who had a background of living in villages and towns. I obviously, cities are a magnet to me. I'm drawn to them. I'm very happy to be here, to be a dual citizen, but it was important to me to go through the immigration process and become a Canadian citizen. And I've lived here in Canada for as many as 3 or 4 months of the year for more than 30 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I only became a full-time resident of Canada in 2015 and a citizen in 2019. But I'm very familiar with Canada and increasingly being Canadian. But rather than think about New England and Canada, the big difference to me is that I always write about, and it's hard to generalize about all 16 novels, how many of them are political, how many of them are novels with a social conscience theme.
Yeah.
My guess is slightly more than half.
Yeah.
And the half that are the novels of social conscience or the novels that are more political, that is more the case with the later novels than with the earlier novels.
Yeah.
But I don't think about that. There's always something in a novel. Here's the same thing. I'm interested in childhood and early adolescence.
Yeah.
I'm interested in those years when you're learning what it means to be an adult, that something formative happens or enters a child or a teenager's consciousness at a very formative time.
Absolutely.
And so, in other words, my novels almost always begin close to or concerning someone's childhood years or early adolescence. That's where you become aware that there's something you need to know, or something you don't yet know enough about.
Yeah. That absolutely makes sense. Okay, John, if you would stick around, we have one more question to talk to you about. But first, we have a few quick reminders for our listeners and viewers out there.
Okay, so For all of you watching and listening tonight, we encourage you to rush out and buy your copies of Queen Esther. I don't know how you couldn't after listening to this book. Perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. You'll not only be getting it at a discount, but all of your purchases there support our show, our guests, and indie bookstores nationwide.
Speaking of books that support independent bookstores and authors, we have the perfect holiday idea for you. The 2026 Friends and Fiction Bundle, brand new autographed hardcovers from 3 of the 4 Friends and Fiction host authors, shipped on their publication dates along with custom exclusive Friends and Fiction swag. So it's Kristy's book in May, Mary Kay's in June, mine in July. All available for one all-inclusive price from our friends at Indie Bookstore Oxford Exchange in Tampa. Plus, you have the option to add the autographed paperback edition of Patti's The Story She Left Behind. This is the perfect book-loving gift to put on your holiday list, or the perfect way to treat a book-loving friend to a whole summer of brand new reads signed by each of us. And if you order by December 12th, we will send you a gift certificate perfect for wrapping and presenting as a holiday gift. So visit friendsandfiction.com/merch or oxfordexchange.com for more information.
And don't forget to visit, sorry, John, we got a couple more things to say. I promise we're getting back to you. Don't forget to visit friendsandfiction.com for details on our show schedule, upcoming in-person events, our merchandise store, and our Substack newsletter, and always the award-winning Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa. Mark your calendars for Monday, December 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern, when they will discuss author Jenny Colgan's new novel, The Secret Christmas Library. That's a lot of good words in a row. Secret Christmas Library.
Yeah. And speaking of our Substack, you can read all of our free weekly posts on the Substack website or app, or subscribe for free to get them directly to your inbox. And if you upgrade to our paid Substack, which we hope you will do, it only costs $5 a month. You'll have access to deeper dives with all of our weekly show guests like John. And we asked John a really great question. So you're going to want it, if for nothing else, to hear what he has to say about that. Plus occasional roundtable discussions and Q&As with some of our favorite authors, like the recent ones we ran with Jamie Brenner and Jesse Q. Sutano. If you enjoy tuning in for our weekly author interviews, this is a great way you can support us for about $1 each week. Check us out at friendsandfiction.substack.com.
All right, John, back to you. So we talked about this before we came on, but you are not touring in the United States for this book. You're not really touring at all. But of course, readers can catch up with you on John Irving, not on friendsandfiction.com, on johnirving.com. But before we let you go, can you tell us anything about what you're writing, what you're working on next?
Well, here's the hard part about talking about what I'm writing next, is that, as you know from our conversation, what I really know about is how it ends. And that's the last thing I want to give away. So
Right.
it's a little hard.
Tell us that.
There's the most important thing on my mind, this ending that is many years ahead of where I'm beginning. And what I know more about. So I'll be a little elusive and say that this novel begins in World War II London with the Norwegian government in exile. Which existed during the Nazi occupation of Norway. So you are with these characters who are part of the Norwegian government in exile in London, but they're all Norwegians.
Oh, wow.
And you're principally in the point of view of a young woman among them who is teaching these Norwegian soldiers, most of them, or part of the royal family's entourage, who is teaching them English. That's her kind of existing role. But in this opening chapter, she and her boyfriend will discover that she's pregnant. And this, unfortunately, is coincident with her already deciding that she is going to break up with her boyfriend.
Woof.
But now she's pregnant. So for the sake of the child, of course, they will have to get married, but she's already planning that she will leave the marriage when the war is over. And of course, she's confident that he won't want the child. And it's around that moment in time when she will have a standard obstetrical gynecological exam, and it is determined that there are 2 heartbeats, and she's going to have twins.
Oh.
And from that moment, she thinks, what if he wants one of them?
Oh.
And I'm going to stop there.
Oh, please don't. Okay.
I'm going to stop there and say, World War II, London, you're in the point of view of this young woman who feels herself now trapped. And the title of the novel is What the Twins Would Remember.
Oh, John.
Oh, I'm so intrigued. And you left us with the best cliffhanger. This is I don't want to say goodbye. I want to keep asking.
I'm going to say goodbye so you can go start writing right this
Yeah, get back to it, John. John, It was so lovely to speak with you today. It was an honor.
Thank you.
You were just an absolute delight, and we thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
You know what a big fan I am, and I am so happy that we were able to talk to you tonight. Thank you for coming.
Well, it's nice to have questions from other writers. Thank you for the questions.
We enjoyed it.
And we can't wait for the next book. It sounds wonderful. Keep writing those beautiful
Me
novels.
too.
Thank you, John.
Bye, John.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Wow. Talk about a cliffhanger.
Wow, that was just talking to a legend tonight. I'm just like, wow, we got to talk to a legend. He's amazing.
And he left us with such a cliffhanger.
I
know.
So speaking of cliffhangers, be sure to tune in next week when Patti and I are going to interview Ace Atkins to discuss his new novel, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. That show will air on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, December 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And it'll be published to our podcast for your listening pleasure on Friday, December 12th.
Thank you to all of you out there for being with us. Since this is our last live show of the year, we also wanted to wish you the very happiest of holidays. We hope that this holiday season brings you all light, peace, and joy. And we will look forward to seeing you online and on our 2 remaining shows of the year, next Wednesday, December 10th and Wednesday, December 17th. In the meantime, have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.